Season of Discovery has been great. However, there are some things that are highly questionable about the game design, and these are things that some people have been complaining about, and some things that I actually haven't heard many people talk about. Now, I think it's fair to say, if we're being completely objective, that Season of Discovery has done pretty damn good. I would say the community reaction to it has been a 8 out of 10. The classic WoW player base is quite, it's got a history of not liking what Blizzard does, but I think in this case, we're actually quite pleasantly surprised. And the name of the game of this season is basically trying a bunch of new stuff and seeing what is well received. It's kind of like an unofficial beta for Classic Plus if we ever get it. But there has been some things that have really irked me, and one of them is having gameplay defining runes be hard to acquire. Now, what I'm talking about here is the new runes that unlock a completely different playstyle for your class. Examples that come to mind is Metamorphosis for a Warlock, which is basically the rune that lets them be a tank, and also the runes for rogue tanks, which are Just a Flesh Wound and Main Gauche. The issue lies in how hard these runes are to get. Speaking from a rogue's perspective, the rune that lets us be a tank, which is Just a Flesh Wound, comes from the Rune of Teasing. Now, the Rune of Teasing can only be acquired once you are honored with the Azeroth Commerce Society reputation, or whatever it's called. You have to hand in a bunch of Waylaid Supplies and unlock this reputation bracket before you can even get the rune that lets you be a tank. So really, the only way that you can play a rogue tank is if you're already level 25 and you've been at level 25 for a bit. But let's think about this in terms of game design. Blizzard put in a bunch of these new ways of playing classes that lets you be a tank. They clearly saw that there's a bit of a tanking issue in Classic WoW and WoW in general, so they thought, okay, let's let other classes be tanks too, and give them the opportunity to try out this new playstyle and make it on par with the other tanks that are in the game. That is fine logic. I understand where they're going with that. What I don't understand is making it as hard as hell to unlock this new tank role if you're playing a class that didn't have it before. Like, Blizzard, you want more tanks, yet you're going to have the runes that let you be a tank be really hard to get. I don't see the logic here. And to make it funnier, one of the other tank abilities, Main Gauche, comes after that long quest line where you have to pay a bunch of gold for items, and finally you can unlock that rune ability. And Warlock is the same. They have this long quest line that takes quite a while, this epic storyline where they can finally unlock Metamorphosis, which will be unlocked almost when you're level 25 for the Warlock's case. So essentially, there's new tanks that are put into the game. The only time people are actually going to try out these new tank roles is when they're already pretty much at max level. Wouldn't you want players getting used to this new role and learning the new toolkit and feeling comfortable before they become a tank in a group? I think that would make a lot more sense. Being a tank is kind of a big deal. There's a bit of anxiety that comes with it. If someone wants to experiment with being a tank, you don't want to give it to them at basically max level. Surely you want to give them the toolkit earlier on so they get more comfortable with it. A great example of this going the other way is in Classic Era. In Classic Era, there were loads of Druid tanks. You'd see loads of Druid tanks in, 5-man dungeons on your way to level 60. At level 60, they kind of dropped off, but that's more because of the meta. The meta that was favoring warrior tanks and warrior tanks only, pretty much. But in 5-man groups on the way up to 60, there were loads of Druid tanks. And I think one of the big reasons why that was the case is because Druids got the bear form at level 10. So these guys had a handful of levels dealing with being a tank and having the tank toolkit before they even stepped foot into one of the first dungeons of the game, like Ragefire Chasm, Dead Mines, and so on. So by the time they were viable to be a tank in those groups, they've had quite a bit of experience with the tank toolkit, and they were used to being in that role. And I think that's why there was quite a lot of Druid tanks in Classic Era, because they were given this toolkit of being a tank at level 10. It just made the transition to actually being a tank in a group that much easier. Now imagine if it was the same design philosophy in Season of Discovery. Druids would get bear form at level 55. There's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to have the confidence to be a tank because they're just not used to the toolkit. I see the logic where Blizzard is going with adding these new tank roles to these classes, yeah, there's a tank shortage, and I think Season of Discovery is trying to address this, but I'm seeing a contradictory goal here with making the tank toolkit really hard to get in terms of getting the runes for them. It seems like there's two conflicting philosophies here, which it's just very questionable. I don't know what they were playing at, to be honest. Surely you want like the game-defining, role-defining runes to be unlocked quite earlier on, so that you actually get used to working with this new toolkit and like way of playing. To play devil's advocate, I think you could say that, oh well, being a warlock tank or a rogue tank is such a unique thing, and like only the most seasoned and explored warlocks and rogues can even attempt to do it. And it's like, okay, sure, I guess that's one way of putting it. Could we not have like some epic quest line to get these runes at like level 10 or so? It just doesn't make much sense to me. You want more people trying out the tank role, but you also want to make it as hard and cost prohibitive as possible for them to do it. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Another thing that people have been complaining about is the Waylaid Supply crates, and these are crates that you get while killing monsters and opening chests, and you'll have to turn them back into the Azeroth Commerce Society. But if you fill these crates with the items they're supposed to have, usually some trade items that you can get from your craft, you actually get more reputation and silver. And the problem is that when they're unfulfilled, they're actually unique, as in you can't carry more than one. But when you fill them, they don't become unique, so you can start stacking them. Now, I'm sure you guys have experienced this yourself, where you get a Waylaid Supply crate, and you don't have the materials on hand to fill it. Now you want to go back to your home city, like you want to stop whatever you're doing, go all the way back to your city, go into the auction house and fill that crate. Because if you don't, there's a chance that you're going to get another Waylaid Supply crate, and you can only carry one. So the incentive is to fly all the way back to town and stop whatever you're doing, and it's just very tedious. I've heard some people say that traveling in Classic WoW is just part of the game, and I agree. But when I'm like traveling across the world and flying on griffins and going on ships, I don't feel aggravated by it. But when I'm just like busy leveling or farming gold and I get one of these crates, part of me is just like, oh god damn it, I have to go back. That's not very fun. Having to stop whatever you're doing and fly all the way back, I don't think is very enjoyable. So another thing that people have been complaining about is class balance, and to be fair to Blizzard, like, I just think it's a bit of a nothing burger, this class balance discussion, because in every new iteration or patch of WoW, there's going to be someone that's doing the best DPS or doing the best healing or is the best tank. And, you know, this is tweaked over time. That's why I think it's a bit of a nothing burger. Like, Blizzard is going to, you know, address the balance and, you know, tweak things as needed. The biggest complaint, I think, comes from caster DPS who feel like their DPS isn't high enough. And one of the main reasons for that is that to unlock a spell rank, you need to be a specific level. For a spellcaster, most of their DPS comes from what level of spell they're casting. As in, let's say you're like a level 25 caster DPS and your main spell has a new rank that is unlocked at like level 26. That sucks. The difference between like a rank 5 spell and a rank 6 spell is absolutely huge. It's like 50% more damage. I think what Blizzard could do for this, again, I'm not some like game designer expert or anything, but I think they could probably make it so that they round down the spell ranks. So if like something is 1 or 2 levels out of reach for, you know, the level cap of whatever phase we're in, maybe just take those down to like level 25 or 40 or whatever the situation is, because I'm playing a rogue and most of my DPS comes from my weapons. Like, everything else is a bit of like, it's a bit of sprinkles on top. Like, the amount of damage I get from, you know, unlocking a new rank in Sinister Strike or Eviscerate is actually quite minimal, because a lot of my damage actually comes from my weapon damage and attack power, not necessarily from the spells themselves. And that's not the case with caster DPS, it's the exact opposite. I do think that caster DPS could have some things tweaked in their favor, just to make them a bit more on par with the melee and hunter DPS, which is dominating right now. But I think people get a bit too hung up on like complaining about class balance. It's like, yeah, Blizzard is going to be working on it. It's a work in progress, guys. And who knows, maybe next phase we're going to see caster DPS absolutely dunk on as hunters and rogues. It may happen, right? The fun thing with Season of Discovery is we don't get to have a meta for long. Like, things are gonna change drastically when we get to like a new level bracket. Well, yeah, these are some questionable things about Season of Discovery. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and sub for more.